Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see you all and have spent the day with you. It's an honour to be here. What a day. I've really enjoyed today. Massive thank you. It's been incredible from start to finish. And share a room with people who share this mission to make Scotland and indeed the world a safer place to live and grow up. We've been mentioned a few times today with the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, a national centre for expertise in reducing violence in Scotland, taking that public health approach and being bold in our solutions. But we know that there's a long way to go. So today I want to talk about three things. The first is the indispensable role that Medics Against Violence have played in Scotland's journey to reduce violence. The second is to share some reflections on the changing face of violence in society in Scotland and how together we can and must tackle what lies ahead. And the third, I don't think Father Gregory's in here, is he? No. I'll say it to you anyway, to offer my admiration for Homeboy Industries. I've admired them for long from afar. And it was only recently that my wife became a big fan because she was watching the Kardashians and they were on the Kardashians last year. And I was like, that's from work. I promise I don't watch the Kardashians. It's Becky. So, I was amazed to see, just how much traction, how much attention they get, but rightfully so for the quality of the work they do. And that was a beautiful input just before the break, so thank you to them. But on to Medics Against Violence. So when MAV was founded, the premise was simple yet groundbreaking. And I think those of us in this room have been immersed in it for some years. It's easy to forget. But actually, who better to address the consequences of violence than the very people who see it most intimately? MAV quickly emerged as the beacon of innovation in this space and I know we give her credit lots across the day, but Christine Goodall's leadership so vital to that success, and she's shaking her head at me, stop giving me comments, stop giving me compliments, it embarrasses her, but she deserves it. What I've realised though since joining the VRU 18 months ago now is that MAV has been so impactful, not because it's an organisation of people who are doing jobs, but it's much more because MAV have created a movement. The word movement was used earlier today. And MAV saw the need to treat the roots of violence. And I often say we've all got a role to play to reduce violence in Scotland. And MAV are really testament to that. MAV's work has transformed lives, and it's something that I've heard about every single week since I've been in the job at the VRU. I've seen it and heard it firsthand, and people have stepped out of their clinical roles and into the community, speaking to people in schools, challenging unhealthy cultural norms, and educating on the real human cost of violence. And you guys in here have shown what true holistic support looks like. Each story of a life redirected is testament to the power of MAV's ethos, which we all share in this room, that violence is preventable and prevention is everyone's responsibility. It was stated earlier by Mark Sutherland, the ACC, Scotland streets are a different place today than they were 20 years ago. When the VRU was established in 2005, we've heard of Glasgow being dubbed the murder capital of Europe and the developed world. Knife crime was a real challenge, gang culture was thriving, and lives were being destroyed daily. But it's through that partnership and public health approach to violence, and dare I say, and repeating what was said earlier, an absence of egos, that we were able to turn a corner. The rate of homicide is more than halved. Knife crime amongst young people has dropped dramatically. And it is indeed, I need to stress this as well, we are concerned about some of the rise in young people getting involved in violence in Scotland today. But it has been young people that have led the way. And that needs to be noted, and that's significant. And here's the critical point. None of this was achieved through policing alone. The VRU is part of Police Scotland. You can't police your way out of these issues. They were achieved because we of Scotland treated violence as a disease, addressing its root causes, not just its symptoms. So this is where MAV's contribution stands tall. You've shown us that violence isn't inevitable. You've engaged communities with compassion and empathy, combining medical insight with what I call street-level realism. And you've reminded us that every statistic has a face, a story, and most importantly, a future worth saving. But as the public health model tells us, we have embraced this together. We have to embrace this together. Violence evolves. The nature of harm is shifting. While homicides, knife crime and gang violence may have decreased, we're witnessing an unsettling rise in other forms of violence, domestic violence, coercive control, cyberbullying, and online grooming. There are reports of increased violence amongst young people in schools, and now the statistics are starting to tell us that, as well as testimony from young people and teachers. The boundaries of violence have expanded into places that some of us maybe once thought were safe, our homes, our schools, and our digital lives. And the risk factors remain remarkably consistent. So growing up in poverty, family members with addictions, being in and out of the care system, undealt with intergenerational trauma, to name a few. And we live also now in a post-pandemic world where social media features in how we engage with one are increasingly. In Scotland, this is one thing that hasn't been said today. 1 in 4 children are growing up in poverty. And the Joseph Rowntree Foundation did a report on this, and it's the same as it was 5 or 6 years ago. It's still 1 in 4 children, but the percentage of that 1 in 4 that live in deep poverty has increased significantly, and families are having to choose more and more between heating and eating. And we know that the vast majority of those living in these situations don't actually get involved in violence. But we in this room, and as Scotland, and as other parts of the world as well, need to appreciate it's harder to make safer, healthier decisions when we live in that chronic stress with unmet needs and deep-lying trauma. And it may have been James that has said to me multiple times, if you grow up in a war zone, it's no wonder you might grow up a warrior. Staying true to the public health model demands that we adapt. And I often quote Justin Trudeau, who says, change in this world that we live in has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again. It's going to continue to change at a rapid rate, more rapid than we've ever seen before. But this demands that we don't just react. We have to anticipate change now. It's not good enough to continually react because of how quickly things change. And actually, over the last 20 years of the VRU's existence, of MAV's existence, of the research that's been compiled, the work we've done together, we know what works. But how we deliver it in the context we face today looks very different. So youth work, safe spaces, the role of mentors and role models, timely support direct to families as and when it's needed in a non-judgmental way, long-term funding, and jobs, helping people find purpose in their lives and connection to their communities as partners in this room appreciate. And it's clear to me the question isn't whether we're up to the challenge. Of course we are. The question is, how can we take what we've learned and apply it to the future in this new context that we face? The answer? Relationships. This is exactly the same thing the brilliant John Carnochan said when he founded the VRU. Relationships between all of us working in violence reduction, others who work in charities, health boards, local authorities, teachers, social workers, citizens, communities, and so many more. As I was writing this bit, though, I cringed. I hate saying this sort of thing because it sounds fluffy, it sounds intangible, and it's hard to evidence. And I don't know if you can tell, I'm in the middle of writing my business plan for Scottish Government, and they keep asking me, how are you going to evidence this and that and the other? So I do cringe when I say some of these things, but I think there's enough wisdom in this room to know, and we've heard enough stories today to appreciate that it is often the seemingly fluffy, intangible, and hard to measure things that changes lives. A chance meeting with a friendly face in a shop or on the street, a youth worker who listens more than they talk, a teacher who gives a hug at the right time, a doctor who asks what matters to you, someone who gives you a chance at a job you've always wanted but for whatever reason never felt good enough to do. And to quote Father Gregory Boyle earlier, he calls it relational wholeness. And it's true. Continuing on that theme of relationships, we have to work together like never before to reduce violence in Scotland. This means sharing data and getting good quality data as well, multi-agency data that tells us stories, as well as appreciating the qualitative lived experience data that we've spoken about today. Pooling resources and building initiatives in ways that meaningfully involves communities. One of our areas of focus at the VRU is that we've got 5 areas, and one of them, I should say, is lived experience at the heart of everything we do. And we know that it's only by meaningfully involving people with personal experiences of these issues that we will keep our finger on the pulse and our work will be targeted appropriately. This is why in the next couple of months, with support from someone in the room, we will be building an advisory board of those with lived experiences that guide everything we do. And that means across the VRU, we'll have people at every level with personal experiences of violence who are working, guiding what we do, as well as being almost governed by that too. And we take inspiration from MAV for how they've done this and how they've valued lived experience as part of the Navigator's work. It's incredible. So, to be clear, MAV's future, I see it as integral to Scotland's strategy for reducing violence. Your ability to reach people when they're at the most reachable and teachable, whether in hospital beds or in classrooms, is unique and unmatched. And we need to continue embedding this work in our broader efforts, ensuring that prevention and early intervention remain at the heart of everything we do. And we've got to tackle the less visible, insidious forms of violence that are emerging, not shying away from the challenges around social media, addiction issues, and incel influence. We've got to integrate trauma-informed practices across every sector, justice, education, healthcare, social services, and more, to address the ripple effects of violence before they become waves. And we must continue to prioritise high-quality, ethical, I say ethical, because sometimes you see it done wrong, participation and youth engagement, because it's for shaping the attitudes and mindsets of our next generation that will cement that lasting change. And I often say I would love nothing more than the VRU not to need to exist, because violence is such a non-issue in Scotland. But I'm not naive, and I know we're a long way away from that. So in closing, let me say this. MAV are proof that changing the story of violence is possible through compassion, courage, and collaboration. You've rewritten the script for countless lives. And as we look to the future, we know that Scotland can and must continue to lead the way in violence reduction, and it will do so with MAV at its heart. So the work we all do is about building a society where everyone has an opportunity to thrive, free from the shadow of violence. It's about hope. And in this room, and in each of the conversations we've had and the inputs we've had today, and I work with many of you kind of in every week, I see that hope alive and burning brightly. And I'm a big fan of this guy. He's a systems theorist. His name's Myron Rogers. It's not as boring as it sounds, right? He's a cool guy. And he has 6 leadership maxims. And one of them, my favourite one, is this. The process you use to get to the future is the future you get. And this is why I think it's vital. We've got to move forward with hope, kindness, determination, and to make that point again, and I'm not pointing at anyone in the room, honestly, I'm not, in the absence of egos. We've got to work together and put our egos to one side. So on behalf of the VRU, thank you to everyone in this room for your commitment, your passion, your unwavering belief that a better Scotland and world is possible. And I'm looking forward to working on this together with you, knowing that the future is ours to shape. Thank you.